Hello, everyone. We are here for a quick live stream of, I guess you want to say, my Nintendo collection. Just see what happens here. Anyways, we'll start off these games in my collection. I have around 171 games. I'll talk about when and where I acquired them, strong connections to. Others I've picked up and they're like my video game backlog, and I'm not really entirely sure when I'm going to get around to them, but I will at some point. But anyways, just up front, so we'll kind of start with, I guess, like your old school original Nintendo titles. First one is this one. Here's a Racer. Some backwards. This is great. But you can see Rad Racer here. I don't know. Got this copy about 2 years ago. Main reason was I got it because a friend of mine made the music for a kind of electronic album that he had created, and he kind of did these video game cover songs, and one of them was from Rad Racer. It's an okay game. It's not my favorite. I'm not a huge racing fan guy, but I have played it a little bit. I remember seeing it at stores and whatnot, but it never really interested me too much. Next one is Kid Icarus. This was definitely a game I remember seeing on the Nintendo cartoon, Saturday morning cartoon. Funny thing is, maybe like some of you, I saw it on television. I heard all about Kid Icarus and the Eggplant Wizard and things like that, but I did not know a soul that actually had this game. And by all accounts, it's actually a pretty fun little game, kind of neat, kind of quirky in its own little way. I'll admittedly have not played it. It's definitely a game I'd like to play. It seems really interesting, but I also know it can be pretty frustrating too. Kind of a typical, really Nintendo title where the difficulty level is actually pretty high. This next game I have a lot of memories with. My friend Josh out there definitely had a lot of fun with this one. This is a Dragon Warrior. I guess just to kind of truth be told, with Dragon Warrior, this was a game that, like a lot of kids, I got this with my I got this with my NES Nintendo Power Magazine. At the same price as the normal subscription, and you got a Nintendo game. What's not to lose? Or I love about that. So my brother and I played this game. It was probably the first RPG that we played and beat. Remember spending many an hour wandering about the kingdom, looking for items, slowly making or grinding through dungeons and whatnot like that until finally, of course, we finished it. And for years, my brother and I would, joke about, you see a slime or the slime runs away or a wyvern. And it's definitely a classic. Oddly enough, we weren't really, at least I was not real inspired to really try too many other RPGs. I know for some people that's their favorite genre, not really for myself, but it was definitely, I don't know, it was more probably about spending time with my brother and kind of think of it like working on a puzzle together, and it's a video game, so I have a lot of good memories about that. Okay, next one. This one I rented a bunch of times. I know Chris at, shameless plug here, my friend Chris at Classic Gaming Quarterly. There's this little coaster there. He uses the term weekend rental. This was a weekend rental for me. This is a Faxanadu. Kind kind of a weird, kind of an action platformer, open world RPG kind of thing. I don't know. It's an okay game. I guess for myself, the grinding to just get money to purchase the things you need to do in the game kind of got incessant. But it's definitely kind of a unique game in the fact that it kind of has its own flavor to it. I thought the world was cool. The music, though, because of lack of variety, it certainly gets kind of grinding. You can close your eyes and hear the music just grind through your skull like a lot of Nintendo game music where there really wasn't a lot of variety. But it was a fun game, and I know I rented it multiple times. Somewhere I still have my little yellow notebook with the with all my passwords and stuff like that. So next one would be I actually picked this up at the local gaming store. This is Star Tropics 2, Zoda's Revenge. This is I don't know. I remember reading about the whole story with Star Tropics, and it was a kind of a unique, I guess you'd say, kind of an RPG, I guess, in a way. You're searching around this island looking for items. Admittedly, I have not played Star Tropics or Star Tropics 2. I remember I had a strategy guide for the first Star Tropics, and I remember Zoda's Revenge was coming out. So I guess when I saw this at the local store, I thought to myself, hey, I already have Star Tropics. Let's pick this one up. And obviously, I'd want to complete them in sequence, but I don't know. If you can comment or whatever, tell me what you think of the game. That'd be fantastic. Okay, since I just mentioned it, Star Tropics, purchased at the same store. I know a lot of people have strong connections to this game. I've seen lots of, playthroughs of it. It does look really interesting. Again, I wish I would have kept my old Nintendo Power strategy guides. I believe I even maybe had one that was totally dedicated to Star Tropics. But I do have some other I got a couple other books that have like a walkthrough for it, so I wouldn't be totally lost. But it's the kind of game, again, that if my brother and I would have had this one, even though we had heard about it at the time, it's probably one we would have sat there and played over the course of many evenings over the summer until we finally beat it. But yeah, I know the storyline's pretty unique, and that's what kind of sets it apart from other games. It's got kind of a unique approach. Next one, kind of a typical action platformer and license thing. This is Robocop 2. I guess the question you could ask is from Data East, which is worse, the movie or the game? Probably the game. Both Robocops, and I'll be honest, I enjoyed the music, but the game itself, the Robocop is arguably more stiff in the way he moves in the game than he is in the movie. And I don't know, I liked the movie. I thought it was kind of cool, typical late or mid-90s or mid-80s action kind of film. And I liked the subject matter, but the game itself was pretty limited, and I don't know, you kind of go through it once, you've kind of done everything with it. Here's the original one, RoboCop. I don't have RoboCop 3. I know that one's a little more rare. I know he flies around in that one because they gave him the ability to fly in the third movie. I don't know. I can listen to the main theme of this song. It's good, like music you can like work to. So sometimes I'll put that up on BitTunes or something. The game itself's okay, but again, it kind of loosely follows the story from the film. And again, it's, the levels kind of mesh together because whether you're fighting, whether it's the bosses or just the average enemies, they're just kind of all the same. But I did enjoy playing this one, and I was glad to pick it up a couple years ago. Oh, the game that was probably one of the most addictive games ever for the Nintendo, and that, of course, is Tetris. Tetris, classic puzzle game. The cool thing about Tetris that I always feel is that there really isn't a lot of explanation that you need to give somebody. So if somebody's not really used to video games, it's a real approachable kind of game. It's the kind of game my wife would play because there really isn't a whole lot of explanation. The buttons, perform a pretty simple function, and they can kind of figure their way out pretty fast. And it's one of those ones where it's simple to get good at, but it's tough to master it. Usually, I get to about level 8 or 9, and then it's all over at that point. But I don't know. It's a good game if you're looking for some kind of mental puzzling kind of fun, and I don't know. I guess I would say I like the original one best out of all of them. Okay, some of you, I love pinball, and this is the Nintendo, I guess you'd say port of the classic pinball game Pinbot from 1984 by Williams. Certainly the machine is much more fun than the Nintendo game, but I think the Nintendo game does a fair job considering its limitations of kind of replicating what it's like to play Pinbot. In fact, Pinbot's one of 3 games, pinball machines that were made along this story. Pinbot's the original, and then you have the Bride of Pinbot, and then you have Jackbot, which was the final iteration of it. Admittedly, I've only played Pinbot and Bride of Pinbot. I've not played Jackbot yet as a pinball machine. But this is actually a pretty fair attempt to try to replicate a pinball machine into an NES game. There's a couple of games, pinball-themed NES games, and I think this one did a fair job, all things considered. It's certainly not going to be quite as you're not going to quite have the ability to do the skill shots, especially if you're opening pull into the game. But it's fair. It's fair. One of the most fun yet frustrating games in the NES library, at least for sports games, and that is Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. I don't know. I could not play Punch-Out, the non-Tyson version. There's just something about it that this is what it is to me. And I do realize the other Punch-Out existed prior to that. It goes back to the arcades. But this game is just classic. Little Mac is really, of course, it's like playing a game of Rocky, even though there never was Rocky for the NES. And it's tons of fun. I hate Bald Bull with a passion, just probably like most of you out there. And while I certainly never beat Tyson, I think the farthest I ever got was Mr. Sandman a couple times. So yeah, I never faced Macho Man either. I remember watching people, you'd put in the Tyson code, and if you ever wanted to feel like you really didn't have much of a chance in life, and just go and do that a couple times. Get mauled by Tyson in about 20 seconds, and you'll learn that some things are better just leaving it as a dream and saying to hell with it. But I still had a lot of fun with it. And again, I also tried this game on the Power Glove when I got the NES Power Glove back in the day, and you learn pretty quickly the Power Glove was a pretty crappy peripheral for the system. But it looked cool to try it. At least that's what it looked like on the demos that they always show on commercials. But I don't know. Still had a lot of fun with this game, even if I never came close to beating it. I know there's a video out there of a guy who's sitting with his back to a television, and he's blindfolded, and he beats Mike Tyson. And I don't know. I don't even know what to even say to something like that. If you're that great at a game that you can beat it standing backwards and blindfolded, I mean, I don't know. That just seems absolutely surreal to me. So those are some of my original NES titles. I got a lot more, obviously, since I said I have 171 games here. So on to our next one. We'll start with this one. For those of you that are members of like the CGQ forums, probably one of the most fun times. I still think it was maybe the most fun time in the forums and as a group was watching Chris of Classic Gaming Quarterly stream his playing through of Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. This was a game I never had played when it came out. I remember when it did, and you know, it was a big deal, and I remember people talking about it and whether they liked it better than the original Zelda. But watching Chris and kind of hanging out with all the people there was a lot of fun. Seeing people help Chris get through certain parts of the game was fantastic, and I don't know, it was the closest thing I ever had in a long time to, I guess, feeling like I did back as a kid, where for a game like Zelda, it's a one-player game. So, if you were there, unless you're playing the game, you're watching somebody play the game. And so it kind of felt like you did with your friends. You're hanging out, kind of making fun of what's going on, trying to, I don't know, whether you're kind of entertaining yourself as you watch that person struggle through the game. Not to like mock or tease them, but really to just kind of enjoy the moment together. And that's what was really cool about it. So I have not gotten around to this one, but now this is a game I definitely played a lot. I remember actually when I first saw it, I was at my cousin's house. This, of course, is The Legend of Zelda. My cousin got this game, and of course, he just like this one. It was the gold copy, and that, of course, just I don't know. I guess people are easily charmed by something so simple as like, ooh, a gold cartridge. But anyways, The Adventures of Zelda, classic game in so many ways. And to me, I guess the coolest thing about it is that we continue to learn more about this game, seemingly every year. Like the recent discovery of the whole like programmer part of the game, which is like half of the whole what's on the game. Playing like this never meant to be seen programmer portion. I've never been there, but to me, it's just cool that people are discovering more and more things about this game, albeit probably 30 plus years since it was released. Great game. I think I beat it one time, and I think I was almost in disbelief when I did it, because it was one of those ones where everyone talked about, have you beaten it? And most people couldn't say that, and I did, and I don't know. I was on cloud nine for a few months there. Okay, next one is another classic, Metroid. Metroid, a game I first played at my cousin's house. My cousin's the same guy who had the Legend of Zelda. He had a Nintendo about 2 years before I did, so my Nintendo memories, at least initially, weren't even as much as going to a friend's house like Chris talked about with Stuart or Jonathan. Yeah, Jonathan, I think. Yeah. But anyways, my earliest Nintendo memories were really of going and seeing my cousin who had a Nintendo, and we used to rent this one quite a bit, Metroid, and we'd take out, we'd steal Oreo cookies and sit there and just play Nintendo all day long. Oreos and Kool-Aid, just what you need, a lot of sugar. Of course, this game is frustrating as hell. It's easy to get lost because everything kind of looks the same. And I'm pretty sure I never beat it. I know I came close, but eventually I think I probably just got frustrated from not knowing where to go next. And of course, you get frustrated and you jump in the lava and you get pissed off and watch your life drain away, and that's it. I think we've all gone through that level of mental defeat, or at least maybe people like myself did that. But anyways, that was Metroid. Great game. This game has, I don't know, for myself, kind of a cool story. This is Excitebike. Excitebike was a game I actually played only a handful of times, and then I saw it at as Nintendo was becoming kind of a thing of the past, at least as far as like the current console was going. Companies and back in the day, for those of you that are not old enough to know this, but back in the late 80s, early 90s, you could rent movies and video games just about anywhere. And this was actually from a convenience store at in my hometown of Elk River, Minnesota. And so as those games were being phased out, they had this game for sale for like $10. And so I remember I had rented it once or twice and had a lot of fun because I especially love the fact that you can create your own tracks, which was always kind of cool. You'd create a track for your friends to try and just laugh as they flip the bike and all that fun stuff. And so I picked it up, and it's one of the few games I kept for a long time. Later on, I ended up selling about a pretty massive amount of Nintendo games just to get my first Super Nintendo, F-Zero, the only game, and an extra controller. I think I sold 49 Nintendo games for that, and Excitebike was not one of them. That was one of the ones I said I needed to keep. So that tells you how much I enjoyed it. Here's a new old one for me, I guess. This is Ice Climber. Kind of a weird game. Kind of a forgotten NES game, I think, personally. Can be kind of frustrating. I don't know if it's as much difficult as it is just it's kind of a game where you just plug away at it. I didn't know anybody that had this game as a kid, and it's really something I saw more of after, once retro gaming kind of became a thing. I saw people mentioning Ice Climber and things like that, and so a couple years back I had a chance to pick it up, and it wasn't very expensive, and I don't know, I still haven't gotten around and played to it. I know a lot of people play it, and then they have like about a 5-minute tolerance, and like, okay, I've seen enough. No, I'm not playing this game anymore, and they shut it off. That seems to be kind of a consensus about some of these early games like this. Here's another one that I guess for me has a lot of nostalgia again because of my cousin. This was one of my cousin's first games, which was the original Nintendo Kung Fu, which was a port of an arcade game, and I can still hear chop 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 chop, or the other sound when you have kicks, and everything was about leg sweeps in that game. Leg sweeps, and if you wanted points, you punched everything. Pretty simple. You're just basically trying to get up to the top of the, I guess, castle or whatever you want to call it to get your girlfriend Sylvia, and it's definitely kind of corny, but I guess for myself it was just fun because of course the farther you go in the castle, the enemies come at you from both sides, and it's really just a classic beat 'em up, except for it's just on one dimension. You're not really, you can jump, but you're not jumping onto platforms or anything. You're jumping and kicking or something like that. So, wow, voice crack there. Yeah, I'm 42 and my voice still cracks. You can laugh about that. But anyways, fun game. Played this a lot at my cousin's house, and eventually when I got a Nintendo, I picked one up, and this was another game I did not get rid of because even though it was kind of limited, I still, for mindless fun, it was one of my go-tos. Oh, here's another one. This is Nintendo Pro Wrestling. This is another one of those games that has like music where I can like I can listen. I can just think of the game and I can start hearing the theme song in my head, just because it's it's not very long and it just cycles on forever and ever. I remember this game, a friend of mine, we had an all-night sleepover birthday thing. That's what kids do. And we rented this game. And I remember playing as Starman repeatedly, or the Amazon, with his cheap little bite move that he would do, or his claw, which seemed kind of cheap. I know Bithead 1000 talked about that, because it would just piss people off, because it was such kind of a dirty move to get people to get knocked down, and then you jump on top of them and hope that eventually they're fatigued enough that you can get a pin. It didn't quite work as well against the computer that way, but when you were playing your friend in pro wrestling, it was pretty much a dirty, cheap way to win all the time. But anyways, it's not a real diverse game as far as like wrestling games go for the Nintendo. I do have another pro wrestling game which I'll show you eventually, but this was definitely an early fun one, and I, for whatever reason, I never bought it until recently. But certainly hearing the music again brought back all those memories. Dr. Mario, really kind of the second of the great, I guess, attempts at a puzzle game by Nintendo. People seem to either have more of a love-hate relationship with this one. They either think it's great, but really it really was kind of introducing you to the classic Stack 3 color games like Candy Crush and all that kind of stuff. My wife loves games like that, but she does not like Dr. Mario, which is interesting to me, because it's like, what's the difference? You played Candy Crush forever, but she hates Dr. Mario, and I don't know why. So this is a game that I thought that she would enjoy because I figured she'd like Tetris. But Dr. Mario was one that, don't want to. Not sure why, but it's okay. That's another one where the music, kind of drags on you a bit. It's almost too happy. I don't know if that makes any sense. Okay, you guys all recognize these next three. Super Mario Brothers 3. Like probably just about everybody that lived during this time period when this game came out. Wow. The movie The Wizard is how we all got introduced, at least the sneak preview, and it was just such a huge leap forward. And the game really is pretty remarkable. I never came close to beating it, but I remember always having fun. And the interesting thing is that it's a game where I think now I'm asking myself all the time, like, why didn't I play it more? To me, it's a pretty cool game. It pushes the system in a lot of different ways, and I thought they were pretty creative in what they did with the levels designed to kind of reinvent something that they already had two of them out. I don't know. I think this is a remarkable game. Kind of giving a shout out to Chris here. Chris was a part of the Gaming Historians Super Mario Brothers 3 episode, and I don't know, it's pretty cool hearing Chris' voice in there. But it's pretty cool to hear the whole story of how it got developed, and I can't even imagine the pressure that was on the team as they were putting this game together, because they knew that people were going to be immensely critical of it, and they wanted to see something that was going to kind of knock their socks off. And I think they did a hell of a job. And I don't know. I think if you've ever created anything in your life and it's been well received, and then someone's expecting you to create something else, I think you can relate to the fact that there's a lot of pressure to try to do better the next time around. And that's not easy to do. And the pressure can really eat at you because you're afraid of disappointing people. And this game didn't disappoint, which is huge credit to them and their dedication. Super Mario Brothers 2. I remember playing this again at my cousin's house. My cousin, a little lucky guy. But I remember this one just being so different and so sweet. And of course, we all learned the story why this game was so much different than the first one. But in a weird way, I think that was a good thing. I showed my wife this one a couple years ago, and she at first was like, "Is this Mario Brothers?" Like she thought it was really strange. Um, and I remember this was the first Super Mario Brothers game I ever beat. I think it was a lot easier for myself than the original Super Mario Brothers was. Um, I did not beat the first one or the third one, which I bet you I'm not the only one that can say that. I think a lot of people, this was the one where you beat Super Mario Brothers 2 and everyone just kind of looked at you like, yeah, who didn't? Um, but it was a unique game, and I don't know, it's kind of cool in its own way, and I don't know, fun one. So this is also an original game that I never let go of. When I was a kid growing up, I came to the Nintendo much later than a lot of people. Probably, my guess is it probably wasn't until 1990 that 1990 or 1989 that I got the Nintendo. And the reason I got it was, I don't know if this is a real story that's entertaining or not, but my entertainment growing up, especially in Minnesota in the wintertime, was snowmobiling. That's all I did. I love snowmobiling. And what happened was my my family didn't move anywhere. What happened was is we lived on the outskirts of town for a long time, and what happened was is the town grew up all around us. So from what used to be fields, kind of like set aside pasture land, just grasses and whatnot, suddenly that became housing developments, and the community kind of quickly became a suburb of the Twin Cities. Um, and so what that meant is I could no longer really snowmobile in the neighborhood because no one wants people driving snowmobiles in through their front yard, especially not when the houses are so close together. And so I didn't. Pretty soon, I wasn't really able to snowmobile like I used to, and so feeling as though I guess my parents felt as I needed something to do. Um, that was when they kind of relented and said, "Okay, we'll get you a Nintendo." And one of my friends in the neighborhood, we did play his video games sometimes, but not a lot. He had just gotten the Nintendo Power Pad, and so um, we picked up the, I guess you call it the power. Maybe it was called the Power Pack. I can't remember. But anyways, the Power Pack included, of course, a Nintendo, the Zapper light gun, which I still have, and the Power Pad. And so it came with this 3-game all-in-one cartridge with Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, and World Class Track Meet, which was, of course, Nintendo's version of Stadium Events. And we played this game a ton. The Power Pad I actually used quite a bit. At least I didn't have any other games other than World Class Track Meet, but that was always a fun one to bring out with friends. I'm sure all the sugar and things that we were eating back as kids back then, we always had plenty of energy. So running on that thing was something we did quite a bit. And I don't know, I enjoyed it. I really did. It was always fun beating Cheetah in a sprint. And no, I did not hit it with my hands like a lot of people did. I did the whole like quick feet like maniac kind of thing, the maniac dance, and I could beat the computer. So I don't know. I remember that one a lot. And Duck Hunt was the only game that my dad would play. My dad had no interest in playing Nintendo games other than Duck Hunt, and I can remember many a time playing Duck Hunt with my dad. And I don't know. My dad's a hunter, so of course the whole kind of it was pretty easy for him to want to, point at a TV and shoot a gun. That was what my dad wanted to do, and I usually could kick my old man's ass, but it was always kind of a fun one that we shared, and it's something I will never forget. The only game my dad would play. Okay, so that should be most of my first party Nintendo titles. So now we're going to go on to some of the other. I do kind of have these organized by publisher. So we'll go with our Tecmo, and we'll go with Rygar. This is a game I'd heard about it, and of course I saw the little ad for it on Tecmo Bowl, but I never really knew too much about it. I knew that you're a guy that threw like a buzzsaw out in front of you, kind of like a whip from like Castlevania, but I didn't know too much more than that. And later on, I would pick this game up, and the more I've learned about this game, and I've only played it a handful of times, is this game is so much more than what you'd ever expect. It's pretty much kind of an open world action adventure game, and it has an overworld. There's a lot of different elements to it, and it's actually a lot more sophisticated than what you would expect from a game that I believe that was made in 1987, if I remember correctly. There's a lot of sophistication to it, and this is definitely a must-have for the system. This is maybe one of the top 10 best games made ever for the NES, and it still holds up today. The graphics may not be quite as pretty as some of the other games, but in terms of action and play, in terms of I think challenge, I think there's a lot in this game, and with no save states, it's definitely a challenge. You're gonna have to dedicate some time and battle it out. I know with like if you use like a Retron 5 or something like that, that's very helpful because you can actually do what otherwise you would have had to have paused it and kept your system on if you wanted to stop and give yourself a break or something like that. And you'll remember that mom would see that your system's on and turn it off, and you'd be like, "What? No," because you lost all your progress. Okay, since we're sticking with Tecmo, this is Tecmo Baseball. I've only played this game once. It is maybe the worst baseball game in all of Nintendo, and that's saying something. There's some pretty bad baseball games. This game's horrible. It's not fun. It's slow. It's clunky. And quite honestly, I couldn't. I played one game of baseball and was like, this thing's horrible. And I have not played it since, nor do I intend to. I mentioned to you before Tecmo that I had a wrestling game. This is a Tecmo World Wrestling. This game is much better than Pro Wrestling. And this was another one of those games that was originally a rental game that you could get at that Super America convenience store, and it went on sale. And I was a person who rented that game many times. So when I saw that on sale for $10, I scooped that up as fast as I could. And there's a little more diversity in the moves and skill sets of the wrestlers in Tecmo World Wrestling than there is in Pro Wrestling. There's like a play-by-play broadcaster that's in it that kind of tries to describe the action as you're doing all your moves, and that was always kind of, I don't know, if you were the guy that was playing and you were like playing the computer, usually that was kind of entertainment for the person that was watching to sit there and read all the crazy things that the broadcaster was trying to say. You can definitely tell this is an original. Oh, it's hard to see. Okay, well, it's hard to see it, but my mom wrote my name on this game, which gives you an idea. And you can also see the Super America label on the back showing you that. I'm not just making this story up, but this was a game that I really had a blast with. And I don't know. It's one of those games, like I said, you bring your friends over and beat each other up. That was always fun. Tecmo Super Bowl. By far the best football game for the Nintendo. This game is still played by lots and lots of people. There's leagues. There's even a website that they still follow this game, and they make like new versions of they do like a more or less like a ROM adjustment each year and keep the teams up to date. Had all the team names and players. And my favorite team in Tecmo Super Bowl was the Kansas City Chiefs. 2 players, Christian Okoye on offense, running back, and Derek Thomas on defense. Pretty much like having Bo Jackson and Lawrence Thomas from the original Tecmo Bowl on one team. They were that so you had the killer defense and the killer offensive player, and that's why Kansas City was just so damn good. But I know a lot of people swear by Barry Sanders in this game with the Lions because that was during his glory days. But fantastic game. I remember watching those commercials they had with Bo Jackson, and that certainly hit a lot of nostalgia for all those Gen Xers out there. Okay, since there's that one, the original Tecmo Bowl was really where like Bo Jackson shined. He was a legend in that game because he was virtually unstoppable. Fantastic game. Simple, just 4 plays. The job of the defense was basically just to guess what of the 4 plays was going to be run. And I don't know, a lot of fun memories in that. If you, of course, the thing people love to do is you take your quarterback and you take the snap and you run back to the damn near to your own end zone, and you could throw the football almost the full length of the field. And of course, that's completely ridiculous, but hey, that's why it's a video game. One thing you definitely had to learn how to do to be good in Tecmo Bowl is the Tecmo weave to evade tacklers. And if you knew what you were doing, you could pretty much evade the computer to the point where it almost got comical how many times certain players would miss the tackle. But definitely a fun one and one of my favorites. Yeah, I like sports games, and I realize for certain people that's like shameful, but I enjoy them. Nobunaga's Ambition. This game, of course, about feudal Japan. I actually picked this up for my day job is I'm a high school teacher, and I picked this up actually for a summer school class I proposed called History Through Video Games, where to see if you could actually learn history by watching, by playing video games. Like, could you actually learn the history, or is it just, a game that has a historical kind of plot, where you don't really learn history. It just happens to be from a certain time period and you're not really learning anything. So I actually purchased this game with that intent. Unfortunately, that class never really kind of got off the ground, but I guess it was a good excuse to get this classic strategy game. I would not say it's a particularly entertaining game. You manage these different units in different parts of Japan and then send them off to fight other armies. And you can be diplomatic or you can fight. I'm not terribly good at it. Usually my empire falls into failure very quickly. So I guess I have much to learn. But I would not make a good shogun. But I don't know. It's a classic game. You hear people talk about it quite a bit. Kind of in that same genre, also a KOEI game, is Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which of course is about China and not Japan. From what I know, it's pretty similar to Nobunaga's Ambition, just is set in China instead during the dynastic periods of China. And again, if I have not played this one, but if it's anything like Nobunaga's Ambition, I would not do very well. Sorry about that. So, next game is Wrath of the Black Manta by Taito. This is not a real great action platformer. The controls on it are a bit funky, and the bosses are a bit ridiculous, to say the least. It's just a game that seems to have been made very quickly, and it sounds a lot cooler than what it is. And it's not a real big surprise. This is a game that you will see just about everywhere you go. It's like everyone wants to get rid of it. And yeah, there's a reason why. It's not that great of a game. I remember I used to think it was, the name sounds cool, but that's really about it. The game itself is a pretty big disappointment, and part of that is due to the fact that, of course, the next few titles I'm actually going to show you are really the gold standard for this genre of game. And that, of course, is Ninja Gaiden. I know some people say Gaiden. I always heard it as Gaiden as a kid. So whatever, flame me on the comments for that. I don't really care. But Ninja Gaiden was the game I played a ton, rented this a lot. I think the thing that set this game apart from the fact that it was tough, Tecmo definitely did a lot of cruel things in terms of where they placed enemies, and of course, those damn birds that you cannot get away from. I hate those birds. I think everyone hates those damn birds. But the thing that set this game apart was the really cool cutscenes. In a day and age before you had like video, it had very, I guess you'd say, graphic novel, comic book like cutscenes. And while some of the dialogue is, of course, kind of dopey and terribly predictable, I guess as for a kid, it was like soap opera for kids, and you had this intense kind of storyline backdrop about what Ryu was, doing as he was trying to conquer this mysterious evil group of people. And of course, you get to the end of it, of course, and it was pretty cool. I thought the music and everything was intense. It kind of adds to the mood of the game. Tecmo really doesn't get enough credit, I think, for the Ninja Gaiden series in terms of how quality it really is. So in the years later, I ended up picking up the sequels, and this is Ninja Gaiden 2, the Ancient Ship of Doom, which is kind of a dopey name at the end of it. This game's not too bad. This is Ninja Gaiden 3, the Ancient Ship of Doom. Sorry, I skipped ahead. This one's not too bad. This is the third iteration of the game, and this one's worth a little bit of money. I think it's worth like $50, $60. But I wanted to have all three of them. And again, it kind of picks up with the same kind of storyline, same intense kind of cutscenes, and obviously Tecmo realized they had kind of a good thing going, and so they were going to make sure they took full advantage of milking it for all it was worth. Strangely enough, I guess I'll show you how. Here it is, the Dark Sword of Chaos, which sounds a lot better to me than the Ancient Ship of Doom, which we saw for Ninja Gaiden 3. This game is a lot more common. I think a lot of people picked it up because they enjoyed the first one so much. But really, the games are pretty similar overall. There's not a lot of differences to them. I think in the second one and third one, you can climb up a little bit more instead of having to leap back and forth, if I remember correctly. That was one of the things they kind of added. But even then, it didn't really make it that much easier. It was still pretty challenging. So there you go. That's the whole Ninja Gaiden series. Okay, moving on to some more third-party games. Oops. I don't know if you even saw that. Too quick. Rampage, fun game. This game, of course, an arcade port of the classic Smash 'em game, where you were either George or Lizzie. They did not have Harry, the Wolfman, in this port, and you smash cities all across the United States. And it's kind of mindless because you pretty much are doing the same thing for probably about hour and 10 minutes. But if you're looking for just mindless action, it's pretty good for that. And of course, if you're smashing a town that you've been to or you don't like, that was always kind of fun because I'll admit, now that I live in South Central Wisconsin, I enjoy smashing lacrosse. Nothing like destroying your own feeling like you're destroying your own community, I guess. So I don't know. Spun off to a couple of films. Haven't watched those either, but this game was a lot of fun. Got a lot of hours out of it. Speaking of a game that I got a lot of hours out of, this was Paperboy. Paperboy by Mindscape. I remember when I first saw this game, was at my cousin's house. My cousin rented it, and I remember he told me about Paperboy, and I don't know, you tell somebody the actual plot of Paperboy or try to explain it to somebody, it probably doesn't sound all that interesting, especially if they've never seen it before. They're like, oh, what are you doing? You deliver papers. Yeah, well, it's more than that, as you know if you played it. It's actually a whole hell of a lot of fun, and it's actually pretty challenging and frustrating. Paperboy, and then, of course, the sequel, Paperboy 2, were both very fun games and pretty challenging. I don't know if I ever got through the week with Paperboy. I always kind of felt that I always felt it was kind of cruel that you get fired because the Grim Reaper killed you. I mean, is that really the Paperboy's fault? I don't know. And would you get workman's comp? Probably not. Probably didn't have any rights back then. But anyways, fun game. And again, one of those ones I think today I'm not sure if companies would ever want to sell a game like that, but I'm almost surprised they've not done a reboot because I think that would be pretty cool myself. Then your original beat 'em up, Renegade by Taito. This game is actually damn tough. Pretty much if you enjoyed like Double Dragon or River City Ransom, this is where it all got started. And probably the coolest part of this game is it's hard to read at the top, and it says 2 a.m., no time to be alone in the subway, and you're about to find out why. So apparently you're just on your way home from work, and pretty much crap hits the fan, and now you find yourself in the middle of a big brawl, and I guess that's what we're supposed to believe. Now you're in the middle of fighting a giant street gang all by yourself, and I don't know. I do not get very far in this game. I'm not very good at Renegade. I've seen people that are pretty good at it, and it's pretty cool, but the controls are just not very good, and that makes it hard to want to play when you feel like you're not able to really defend yourself all that effectively, especially in a beat 'em up. That's kind of a necessary thing to do. And you can't really just get through it just by button mashing either, which in a lot of other beat 'em ups, that's pretty much what you do most of the time. You just sit there and you smash buttons, and you can just, if you don't know the special moves, you can at least just bludgeon to death with jabs or kicks or knees. And this game doesn't quite work that way. It's a little more tricky. And but still, this is where it all got started, so it's cool having the original. TNC Surf Designs. This is a cool game. Kind of like definitely period of the late 80s, early 90s when everything surfing and like skateboarding was the cool thing. My cousin, same one with all the video games, was a big skateboarder. And I was always envious of the fact that he had a ramp in his backyard. And so anything that was skateboarding or surfing was like kind of the clothes kids wore back then. And Chris on Classic Gaming Quarterly, and maybe you can kind of see the similar elements here when you look at the title for here it is, Town and Country, or which is TNC Surf and Design, is the guy who did the artwork. Chris found that guy and got him to do the artwork for his coaster. So you can kind of see in the little logo up there, you can kind of see the similarities. And that's pretty cool to me that he actually got to meet him, talk about it, and see some of like the original concepts for, he had some of that stuff around. And I don't know. It's kind of cool to talk to people that were part of this. Really, kind of an iconic style for kids like myself and Chris back in this time period. Okay, here's an interesting game. This is Romstar's Twin Eagle. Pretty much a shooter where you're helicopters. I have not played this game. I purchased this actually to give to another person, but he already had a copy of it. So I'm like, oh, I guess you're going home with me then. But Romstar is kind of they didn't make a lot of games, so it's kind of an oddball one you don't really find too much. And I don't know. I still haven't played it yet, but I'll get around to it soon. You can see the Apache attack helicopters, of course, were a big part of the 1991 Gulf War. And it seemed like a lot of games were kind of picking up on that whole attack helicopter thing. I know they had movies. What is it? Is it Firehawk? No, Firehawk is the one with Clint Eastwood in the stealth fighter. Yeah, but there was a movie with Nicolas Cage where he was a attack helicopter pilot. I remember, and they were trying to be like their army version of Top Gun. I remember that. Here's an interesting game. This is Journey to Silius. It should have been known as the Terminator, but they had a licensing snafu, so they had to quickly kind of reinvent the game. This game's freaking awesome. Little action platformer. Music is outstanding. Sunsoft does an amazing job, and the game is really, I think this is a must-have. You don't see it nearly as much out there. Definitely, if you can pick one up, get it. It's pretty fun and pretty challenging, and the music is outstanding. The level design is great, and it still holds up pretty well. Okay, Krusty's Funhouse. Acclaim made a whole bunch of Simpsons-based games. I have all of them. And Krusty's Funhouse, of course, was what happened when all these mice or rats took over. And, of course, you have to try to help Krusty deal with it. And the gameplay, it's more of a puzzle-type game than really like anything action-orientated. Most of these games are not really all that great, but they still were funny because, of course, it's The Simpsons and an institution that's still going on today. Okay, since we're talking about licensed stuff, here's Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, the game made by Virgin, which, of course, went along with the Kevin Costner film. I enjoyed watching the film as a kid. In fact, I think I went and saw it in the movie theater 3 times, which I don't know if I should be proud of that or I should be ashamed. But it was a lot of fun. And I bought the game, and the game, at least at the time, I thought it was really fun. And more recently, when I put it back in and said, hey, let's relive the good old days, you sometimes find out the good old days were not that good. And this game is not very good. There's some over the top views where it's almost like you're playing kind of like Gauntlet, but much, much worse. And you're asking yourself, what in the hell why did I ever want to play this game? And some of the one-on-one fights, like your fights between yourself and Guy of Gisborne, or the Sheriff of Nottingham, they're pretty dumb. It's pretty dumb kind of fencing kind of game. And you're really asking yourself, like, who thought this was ever fun? But at the time, I guess you felt it was cool because you enjoyed the movie. And so it's one of those ones where the memory didn't quite fit the experience I had, as a person playing it 20 plus years later. So I think I enjoy the movie a lot better now then I enjoy playing this game, but I still picked it back up. Now for one of the more stranger games I have. This is A Boy and His Blob by David Crane, and this is from Absolute Software, Absolute Entertainment. And this is a really unique one. I remember reading about this in Nintendo Power, and one of the unique things about it, without getting too much into the story, is the fact that it's a rare Nintendo game where your character cannot jump. There's not too many games in the system where if you're in an action platformer that your character cannot jump, which of course would be immensely useful if he could, but for whatever reason they decided not to incorporate that element, and instead you're supposed to use the blob that you have with you to transform to pass all the different kind of obstacles in the game to reach the items and places you need to. And the game is really a ton of memorization. I'd strongly recommend that you watch the Friday Night Arcade of The Boy and His Blob, where he talks all about the strange storyline, which is trying to be encouraging people to eat healthy, which is strange in my opinion. I don't know. It's a unique game, and I know that they just rebooted it again for the Nintendo Switch, and I've heard it's much, much better. But for a Nintendo game, it's definitely a unique one, and I'd recommend it mainly because it's pretty unique. I'll just kind of leave it at that and let you enjoy it and discover it for yourself. This is another one, probably one of my favorites. I know for a long time this game was kind of pilloried or made fun of, and that is, of course, Trade West Battletoads. This game, I don't care what anyone says. I freaking had a lot of fun with this one. Just a beat 'em up and a lot of fast action to it. Yes, it was pretty much meant to be a ripoff of like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but I like the music. I thought this game was actually much better than like what the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were, at least the Nintendo versions, the NES versions of their games. That changes over time as the Super Nintendo came around, and they're more like the true to the arcade ports than the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are much better. But for NES, Battletoads to me kicks the shit out of. Sorry, I shouldn't have said shit. Sorry, I said it again. Kicks the crap out of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles any day of the week. Played this one a ton. You can see there's the name my mom wrote because God forbid someone take these games from me. Okay, last one. I don't know why I picked this one up. This is I picked this up at the local game store. As you can see, it's been written upon. This is for the convenience store it used to be rented at, Viking Express 2. My guess is this was being rented out in Reedsburg, Wisconsin. This is Electro Brain's SuperCars. It's a kind of an okay game. It's kind of a top-down racing game. I'm not a huge fan of racing games, but it is kind of an unusual title, so I picked it up. But the condition, as you can tell, is pretty much terrible, especially with all the discoloration. And trust me, I actually worked really hard to try to clean that and get it to come off, but it's just kind of a lost cause, and they even threw in the label, which sucks even more. But I don't know. It's an okay racing game. I didn't think it was particularly fun or exciting. I think I'd rather play Ivan Stewart's Off-Road than play SuperCars myself, but it's kind of like that one a little bit. Okay, so I see that we're about an hour into this. I think I'm going to call it a stream for today. I actually have a lot more games left to go. In fact, you can see all my games over here. You can see my pinball machine. So there's a lot more to go, but at the same time, I don't want to have like a stream that goes on for, I guess, 3 hours or something like that. So I guess we'll kind of end that there. I'll come back and start again tomorrow, and we'll try to probably knock down another 4 piles of games. Probably did about 50 games today. So anyways, I'll see you next time.